Welcome to the May 4th meeting of the Rotary Club of South Jacksonville. Great seeing so many people here alive, so many people we haven't seen in so long that we're happy to see. Yeah, thanks to our greeter, Eddie Farhat. You guys know Eddie. If you didn't, you do now. And we have William Harrell to give our pledge.
The pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. One of the fun responsibilities of a Rotarian, given a blessing, is you really do a lot of research trying to come up with something that is meaningful. And it is more meaningful to me to have done all that research, trying to pick out what I thought you might benefit from. So please join me, bow your head in prayer. Mercy is radical kindness. Mercy is grace, forgiveness, and compassion. Let us be grateful as we do our best to break down dissension and fear. Too many have been shattered into pieces. Divisive pattern has demeaned us. Let's commit to redeeming peace around us. Let our faith bloom among all creeds and races. When there is turmoil swirling around us, let us be the calm. When the world and our country is dark and full of fear, let us bring the light of dawn. When the voices shout and conflict reigns, let us be there for relief. When hope is needed everywhere, let us raise our voices for peace. There is power in this room. There is power in our numbers. The energy in this room ensures we can do our part to change the world for the better of mankind. We gathered here today to be reminded of the good that can be traced to Rotarians in our city and around the world. Let our Rotary service shine to all who observe us. Bless this food to our nourishment, us to that service. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Christy, are you with us? Do you have a family of Rotary for us today?
I am. I'm here, President Tom.
Great.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
Just a few updates. So for member birthdays, Lisa Marie Winslow is celebrating her birthday today. So happy birthday, Lisa Marie. And then for member anniversaries, past President Dick Morales will celebrate 42 years with Rotary on May 8th. And for wedding anniversaries, Ron Patrick and his wife Kimberly will celebrate 12 years of marriage on May 9th.
Thanks, Christy.
Thanks, President Tom.
Crystal Braun. Crystal, are you here?
My turn.
It's your turn. Come on up, Crystal.
Good afternoon. This is fun to do today. As the foundation chair, Club Foundation chair, we have the honor of presenting some Paul Harris Fellows today. The Paul Harris Fellowship is named for Paul Harris, who founded Rotary with 3 business associates in Chicago in 1905. The fellowship was established in his honor in 1957 to express appreciation for a contribution of $1,000 to the humanitarian and educational programs of the Rotary Foundation. Foundation programs include an array of projects that are save and invigorate the lives of people around the world and enhance international friendship and understanding. They provide educational opportunities, food, clean drinking water, healthcare, immunizations, and shelter for millions of people. These activities are funded, implemented, and managed by Rotarians and Rotary clubs around the world. Paul Harris Fellows are designated to recognize individuals whose lives demonstrate a shared purpose with the objectives and mission of the Rotary Foundation to build world understanding and peace. So at the end of December, one of our longtime members, valued member, Sandra Kessler, retired. and she decided that she would donate her points to some fellow Rotarians. So Sandra? If you could tell us who you're donating your points to and why.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really great to see all of you. I haven't seen anybody in over a year, I don't think. But I miss Rotary, miss all of you, but I've gotten to the point where it's really hard to remember when it's Tuesday. So, and then when it is Tuesday, now am I Zooming or going or what's going on? But I just decided it was time for me to retire from Rotary, but I appreciate an invite to come back. And but before I retired, I asked Patty how many points I had and found out that it was quite a few. And I found out that if you retire or quit, the points go bye-bye. So I asked her to help me select 4 people to donate those points to, and that's why I'm here. And I was very happy to do that. And I just would encourage you not to quit and donate your points, but to check and see how many you have, because you might want to donate them to somebody else. And it's very important to have Paul Harris Fellows who are in our club. Helps get us big points as a club. I also just want to mention that I also named the Rotary Club in my will, and that's a very easy thing to do, and it's painless. Nobody will be mad at you except after you die and the children die. Okay, our recipients today are Michelle Khalil.
That's right.
Michelle.
Come on up, Michelle. We always like to wait to see if you've got spinach in your teeth, but you look good.
Do you want to do all? Okay.
I'll give the pen and you do the whatever else.
Let's switch.
Okay.
Very much. You can stay here. And oops, that's the wrong one. No?
Yeah.
Not as alphabetical
Official
order.
capacity.
Yeah. Here we go. If you could stay up here, and so I only read this paragraph one time instead of 4 times. All right.
Okay, the next person is Julia Kalinitsky. And here's your pen. Mhm.
We didn't rehearse this, okay?
And then Christy King.
Who's on Zoom?
Let's do.
I tried to get Christy to come today, but she stayed on Zoom, so.
And Lisa Marie Winslow, who I understand today's her birthday, and she's not with us today, but we'll give it to her then.
Thank you. One more member who is donating points also. So if B would come up.
Thank you.
And you would tell us who you're donating to.
I will. So when I realized that these points were available to distribute, you know that I already gave one to my daughter a couple of weeks ago. And then I asked Patty what the balance was. And I was a sponsor for Eddie Farhad. And he has, you know, from even before he ever joined the club, he was here every week, participating every week, and as soon as he joined, he was doing social events. So Eddie, please come up. Get some pictures.
Yeah, and I have to read my paragraph here, so let's see here. So here you are. Okay, To all of our recipients, your contribution to the Rotary Foundation of Rotary International is allaying suffering, improving living conditions, and providing educational opportunities for young people somewhere in the world. Yours is a truly selfless action. You are being recognized today as a Paul Harris Fellow in special appreciation for the ways in which your life exemplifies the humanitarian and educational objectives of the Rotary Foundation. You were designated to receive this recognition by B4 and Sandra Kessler. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to present to you, on behalf of the trustees of the Rotary Foundation, these emblems of a Paul Harris Fellow, the certificate and the lapel pin. The certificate states that you have been named as a Paul Harris Fellow in appreciation of tangible and significant assistance given for the furtherance of better understanding and friendly relations between peoples of the world. Please accept congratulations and sincere appreciation for your commitment to our common goals of world understanding and peace. Please join me in congratulating. And if there's anybody else out there who has lots of points, who would like to help somebody become a Paul Harris Fellow, please let me know. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Run off with my gavel. All right. That was very nice, was it not? Everybody keep all of that in mind. We've got a little sales pitch from Sandra, you know, remember us in your will, all of that. It's all real. So, membership cards on your table, right? Membership is sending out letters and very nicely composed notes to anyone whose names that you submit to us. So keep that in mind, fill that out, leave it on the table, give it to Bill Langley, give it to me, and we'll follow up on that. And hey, Julia, got a CIS update for us? Come on up, Julia.
President Tom. So we have our Communities and Schools Drive going on now. We are collecting back to school supplies. There is a wish list link in the gear, and I believe Patty sent out an additional email just with the listing of everything. So to make it easy, please use the Amazon wish list if you can. Make sure you designate Rotary Club of South Jacksonville in that space where it says from who. I think there's like a little spot you can fill it in, just so we know as Communities and Schools is collecting everything. They're going to set it aside for us to do a service project next month and get together with our families and put it all together and get it ready for the kids for back to school. So.
Anybody have any questions about how to do that? On the Amazon website?
Amazon, there's a link, and hopefully it's easy. I've become very good at Amazon lately. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm getting better.
Looks like everyone follows, so that's good. Very good, very good. Okay, so this weekend there is a district assembly on the 8th. You can log in from 9 to 1. Everybody's looking at me like, well, I don't have to log in. If you are an incoming board member or an incoming officer, you have to do this. Where's Richard? You have to do this. And all of your people have to do this. I don't. So this time. But yeah, so put that on your calendar if it applies to you. And so Lynn. Hey, Lynn. Lynn Bowman. Nice to see you. Come on up. Making sure Richard logs on.
All right, so we have some social activities planned. The first one is next Tuesday night at that's May 11th from 5 to 7 at Manifest Distillery. It's a tasting and a tour. And then the second one is Saturday, May 22nd, Treaty Oak Park Cleanup and Social. So it's a service project as well as followed by a social picnic. And that's from 10 a.m. to 1. I believe both of these already have links on the website for RSVPs, so please RSVP so we can start getting our numbers and getting food and everything ready. Any questions?
No.
All right.
Great.
Be
Thanks,
social.
Lynn. So we're feeding you at the work party. How about that? How about that?
It's great.
Good idea. Thought you'd like that. Okay. Yeah, that covers all of that. All right. So, Stephen Jones, would you like to introduce our visitors and guests today, please?
No. Do we have any visitors or guests, either here or in Zoom land? No? All right.
Wait, maybe
Hit it.
Patty's gonna cue us. Hey, Patty, you gonna
Patty?
cue us? I'm thinking that's a no.
All right, everyone. 1, 2, 3. We here in Rotary welcome you today. So glad you came along, glad you came our way. Our hand of fellowship is yours, in sunshine or in rain. We here in Rotary say welcome, come again. I don't know, is there any way to police the singing over Zoom?
I was wondering if Parker's on there, so he knows how to do it. Yeah. Yeah, well, I was looking to see.
Start at the same
I
place.
was-
Is that a peace pipe? That same thing as a
Is
peace
that like a peace pipe? Yeah. No. I was looking for, Lee Mercier to be here to get us going, but he didn't show up. I was actively soliciting piano players. No one volunteered, even though they've had lessons apparently, and no one volunteered. I know, right? So it's been worse, Charlie. But yeah, excellent suggestion. Jason? Yes. Would you like to introduce our program today?
I would.
And I would like to take a quick moment and thank Sandra and Bea. As a recipient of a Rotary Foundation scholarship when I was in law school, it definitely impacted my life and changed my life in ways that I can't even go into here. And all of you and I shouldn't go into it all, actually. But the recipients of those fellowships, congratulations. It's an important honor, and I'm just happy to be part of it. And I might be so bold to say it was a really good-looking group of recipients. Even you, Eddie. Where's Eddie? Yeah. I mean, rose among thorns there, friend. That was good job. Good job. So with that, very happy to introduce our speaker today. We have Dr. Madeline Zavodny from UNF. She's been with UNF, I believe, since 2017, about. So she received her PhD in economics from MIT. And as I've had to explain to my father-in-law, that's not the Mississippi Institute of Technology. So she specializes in immigration and labor markets. She had, before going to UNF, she actually worked as an economist for both the Federal Reserve Banks of Atlanta and of Dallas. And she currently is on the editorial board of the International Migration Review and is the co-managing editor of the Journal of Population Economics. So with that, to talk to us today, Dr. Zavodny, please.
Thank you. It is very nice to be with you all today. This is like my first time out in a year. So it's very, very different and a little bit nerve-wracking despite having done this for about 25 years prior to COVID. So I have slides that will be coming up. It's an occupational hazard as an economist. And so what I thought I would talk about today, I've been studying the economics of immigration for 25 years. It's a long time. So to distill that into no more than 30 minutes, I will make absolutely sure that you get out of here by 1:30, I promise. I have 5 common misconceptions or misperceptions or perceptions perhaps about US immigration that I thought I'd talk about. And for some, perhaps all of these 5, there are things that you might hear people say that perhaps have some validity to them, and perhaps don't. And so what I hope that you will walk away from the next 30 minutes with is a little bit just more information about US immigration. And I'm happy to stay after for those of you who are not rushing back to work, although I'm sure all of you are, to discuss and debate all of this, you know, in greater detail if you would like. So I realize immigration, you know, not a controversial topic at all, right? All right, so Patty, first percent. So the first perception, or perhaps misperception, that you might commonly hear is that most immigrants, and I'm just going to say immigrants as meaning foreign born, people who are not born as citizens of the United States. So they weren't born here, they weren't born abroad to a US citizen like Ted Cruz or something like that. So if anyone's an immigration lawyer, I'm using it a little bit differently. That's what an immigrant is. And so most immigrants are illegally present in the US is something that you might commonly hear. And so Patty, if you look at this is data from the Pew Research Center, which is one of the best, they call themselves a fact tank, about the division of the foreign-born population in the United States across legal statuses. The biggest part of the pie chart over there in the dark brown is naturalized citizens, that the plurality of the foreign-born in the US have become US citizens, which is a relatively difficult process. You have to take a test that most native-born Americans honestly can't pass. I'm sure all of you could as Rotarians, but the average American certainly cannot. You have to pay a lot of money. You have been present in the United States for quite a while. The second most common group that's down in sort of the light tan there is what's called lawful permanent residents. That's people who you might sometimes hear as green card holders. They have the legal right to live in the United States, but they are not, in most cases, yet eligible to become US naturalized citizens, or perhaps they've chosen not to. But they've either been sponsored by a relative, sponsored by an employer, were a refugee, received asylum status, something like that, and they are allowed to live here legally in the United States as long as they don't commit a felony, in which case they will typically be deported back home. All right, the next group that you see kind of going around the chart, that's the littlest part of that pie chart, is temporary lawful residents. So that's like if you know someone who's on what's called an H-1B visa, which a lot of skilled immigrants in the United States are, they're here temporarily, not permanently under the terms of their visa, but they're also here legally. So the group that many Americans do think constitutes the bulk of immigrants is actually the fourth group, the one in gray, and that's unauthorized immigrants, people who are not legally present in the United States. And currently the best estimates are that it's less than 1/4 of the foreign born. So if someone tells you, they're here illegally, odds are, for the most part, no. I think this comes as a surprise to many people in the United States. So why do so many Americans hold the view, not everyone, but why do a lot of people think so many immigrants are unlawfully or illegally present in the United States? Patty? Well, because that population used, again, sorry, they're all, because that population used to be bigger. So this is, again, the Pew Research Center's estimates of the size of the unlawful immigrant population going back from 1990 to their most recent estimate, which is from 2017. So I think one reason why a lot of people perceive this as being the way the foreign-born population is in the United States, as being largely unauthorized, is because that population grew so much over really the 1980s and particularly the 1990s. And then in 2007, the Great Recession, not a coincidence, that was the peak of the estimated size of the unauthorized population in the US. And a lot of people who were here legally and illegally left because they didn't have jobs anymore during the Great Recession. And perhaps even more, fewer people stopped coming illegally into the United States or stopped overstaying a visa and instead went home. And so since then, the unauthorized population has been falling and is now at about 10.5 million, according to the most recent estimate. Another reason, though, why you hear so many people perhaps say so many immigrants are illegally present in the United States is, Patty, the next one, which is this graph. I told you it's an occupational hazard to show lots of data. I work with data all day long. What this is estimates of the number of people apprehended trying to cross the border from Mexico into the United States. So basically, this is Customs and Border Patrol, their apprehensions, or what are now called encounters. And interestingly, Customs and Border Patrol, changed the wording on this from apprehensions to encounters, because so many people now who are crossing the border illicitly from Mexico are trying to be caught by Border Patrol. So Border Patrol calls them encounters, that they're looking for a Border Patrol agent in order to turn themselves in because they want to start the asylum process. So there has been, over the last few years, this dramatic shift in who's trying to come illegally into the United States, from being prime-age Mexican men looking for jobs in the US to being families coming from Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. And certainly this has dominated the news. And so this is, I think, another reason why people generally perceive so many immigrants as being illegally present is because of these huge spikes that we've seen here in these apprehensions. But there were these huge run-ups of people trying to cross the border. But again, it's a very different group than it used to be. But because again, now it's primarily women and children, it's these families who, instead of coming here in search of jobs, right, they're not being pulled into the US. Instead, they're being pushed out by what are really, truly horrific conditions in their home countries. And they're looking for a better life, and the US certainly offers them the best opportunity. They're going to apply for asylum in the US once they make it here, and most of them are going to be denied and ultimately go back home. But again, it fuels this perception. I'm happy to discuss at the end of this, what, if anything, we should be doing about this. The second perception, Patty, that you'll sometimes hear is that the United States is a nation of immigrants, right? This is the way that we really perceive our national identity. We are a nation of immigrants. What this is showing you is the immigrant share for a bunch of different countries. We sort of picked countries that had really big immigrant shares, and then countries that are a lot like us. So we're here in red. We're at about 14% of our population is foreign born. If we were in the United Arab Emirates, 90%. That's a nation of immigrants, certainly. Singapore, about 50%. Jordan, about 40%. Saudi Arabia, over 30%. Well, now those are very different countries than the United States. But who's a lot like us? Switzerland, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Austria, Sweden, Ireland, Germany. All of them now have bigger shares of their population that are foreign born in the United States. Who's really similar but a little behind us? The United Kingdom, right, at least pre-Brexit, Spain, France, Denmark. So are we a nation of immigrants? Well, maybe, maybe not. But when you compare us to other similar countries, we don't in some ways seem that exceptional in terms of our share foreign born. But the next slide, Patty, shows you our number of foreign born. We're also one of the world's biggest countries. So who's bigger than us? China, as we were discussing at lunch, China doesn't really have immigrants per se. Indonesia, also not a country with a lot of immigrants. India, not a country with a lot of immigrants. Then there's us. We have a lot of immigrants. We have more foreign born than anywhere else. So when people say that we're a nation of immigrants, well, yes, because we have more foreign born than any other country. But again, as a percentage of our population, we don't seem that exceptional. A third and final way to look at this perception of the US as a nation of immigrants is to look at it over time. So Patty, what this next one is going to show you is the share foreign born in the US going back here in the figure. This goes back to 1850, so a very long time ago. So again, we're at about 14% here right now. So after the Civil War, we started going up. So this was the Irish, the Germans coming, then the Irish, then the Italians, and so on. So we're not quite at a historical high in terms of our share that are foreign born. But this was the era here, really the turn of the 1800s and the 1900s, when the US became perceived by itself and by others as being a nation of immigrants. Then in the 1920s, right here, we slammed the door closed. We imposed a whole bunch of laws that restricted immigration, primarily from Europe, but that really impacted immigration from the rest of the world. So our immigrant share steadily declined until this gray line here is 1965, when what was called the Immigration Naturalization Act Nationality Act, sorry, that is really the foundation of our current immigration policy was passed. And since then, we've seen this steady increase. And when we see updates to this because of COVID, it will certainly have flatlined, because really who's entered the US in the last year? Almost no one, but also almost no one has left. So are we a nation of immigrants? I don't know, but not as much compared to other countries in some way as we used to be. The third perception that you might hear, Patty, is that immigrants don't assimilate, and they used to. Well, what do I mean by assimilation? Some people call this integration. It's basically, do immigrants become like US natives? Do they learn English? Do they move into the same neighborhoods, adopt the same customs? Do they earn as much? Do they work as much? Do they work in the same occupations? And so I think there's sometimes you'll hear a perception that immigrants don't assimilate, but they used to. So what this is showing you here in black, this is the share of prime working age, so 25 to 65, of immigrants by their years in the U.S. And so what you see is when immigrants first come, you have a lot of working, and then over time, the share that are working is going up, and then they start to basically reach in the retirement ages, and the share that is working begins to come back down. This green one here, green one, this is their earnings. And what you see is that their earnings go up even faster than the share that are working over time. And then again, when they start to reach in retirement ages, their earnings start to come down. So what does that mean? I'm not sure, but certainly it's maybe a favorable picture of how immigrants are doing in the US economy, and that they're working, their earnings are going up and so on. But to measure assimilation, maybe we want to compare them to US natives. And so that's what Patty, the next slides will do. Keep going. And so what this is showing over on the left is that the blue here is US natives. The red is immigrants. And this is by age. So we're going here from age 20 to age 65. Again, this is US natives. And this rainbow kind of shape is very typical. And what you see is that by about age 40, immigrants become more likely to work than US natives. So are they assimilating? At least into the labor market. In fact, maybe they're even outperforming US natives. What this over here on the right is annual earnings, again by age, natives in blue, immigrants in red. And what you see is that US natives, both of them, their earnings are increasing with age, they're increasing faster than US natives. They're earning more until the very kind of tail end of the work life. So if you think about this as a measure of assimilation, immigrants are maybe not fully catching up with US natives until the very end, but they're also in some ways not doing that badly when you look on average. So are they assimilating? One could certainly argue here that they are. Another way to think about assimilation is instead of thinking about it as this comparison of US natives and immigrants over the lifespan, is instead to think about it as intergenerational assimilation. So you have immigrants, they come, maybe they bring their kids with them, maybe they have kids once they're here. How did their children do? And how do their grandchildren do? Well, certainly their children are us, right? They're Americans, as many immigrants are become Americans as well. And their grandchildren, unquestionably, right? And so that's another way, this intergenerational comparison to think about assimilation. So Patty, next. Sorry, I do really love my data here. So what this is showing you is, this is the average years of education by generation of all immigrants, so all races and ethnicities here. This is men, these first three, and then the second three are women. There tend to be interesting differences by sex. What the reds are showing you is the immigrants themselves, the foreign-born, how much education that they have. The second generation, here in purple, this is the children of immigrants. So they are born in the United States. So what we see for both men and for women is this big jump in education. This is probably a very good thing, right? That that on average, the children of immigrants are getting at least 2 years more education than their parents have. This is good for the US economy, right? And this is again a sign of assimilation. In blue here, this is the third plus generation. This is the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on of immigrants. I would be part of this group because my family came over 5 generations ago. And what you see is that the children of immigrants, again in purple, are really catching up fully with the grandchildren and higher. That at least educationally, there's complete assimilation on average. So next set, Patty, is showing employment rates. And again, there's not anything really troubling here. If anything, the first generation of immigrant men's more likely to work. That's interesting. And then for women, immigrant women are relatively unlikely to work, but we see that the second generation, like their children, always look like the grandchildren and higher. So again, if you hear people say, well, immigrants aren't assimilating, at least by a few measures here they are. If I showed you this for English, it would look like this as well. But yes, immigrants often don't learn English, or at least don't become fluent in English, but their US born children absolutely, positively do. But there are a few groups for whom patterns look very different. So the next set, Patty. This showing you, this here now, instead of being all immigrants, this is Mexicans, and this is education, right? So again, this is the Mexican-born immigrants, low levels of education. Here's how their US-born children do. Here's how the third, first generation descendants of Mexican immigrants do. This is again very positive in terms of assimilation. But if I showed it to you compared to the one 2 slides ago, these are low levels of education. So they're catching up, but plateauing at a lower level than non-Hispanic whites. And what this probably says is that there are things we should be concerned about in terms of what our educational system is doing, what the financial resources these families have, and so on, as to why the US-born children and grandchildren and so on of Mexican immigrants aren't fully catching up in education to non-Hispanic whites. And that's perhaps a source of concern. One more set of these bar charts here, Patty. And so this one's employment. And this is of immigrants and US natives who have not finished high school. So what share of them are employed? Interestingly, these shares that are employed are the immigrant men. And when you look at US natives who have not finished high school, this is adults, very low employment rates. So again, this is a source of maybe some concern about how the assimilation is happening, that we're not seeing high levels of employment among the children and grandchildren and so on of immigrants in this particular group. All right, next set, moving on to perception number 4, Patty. Sometimes you'll hear people talk about immigrants as a fiscal drain. So fiscal is thinking about government spending. What is really important as a takeaway here is that immigrants are a fiscal drain, but so are most US natives. So fiscal drain is the difference between what the government spends, that's included here as outlays, and then receipts, how much the government receives in taxes, right, which we all love to pay. Here and there. This is the first generation, this is the second generation, and then over here is the third and higher generation. The first two sets, the first set here is federal. And what you see is that only here on the left, not this one, is the blue bigger than the red. Only immigrants pay more to the federal government than they receive. Not US natives of the second generation, not of the third generation. When we look at state and local, the picture's different. Immigrants receive basically more in services than they pay in taxes at the state and local level, but so do US natives in the second generation, so do those in the third generation. Our governments run huge debts, and maybe not Florida, because we don't spend it, but the federal government running an enormous debt. Immigrants are the only ones on average who are kind of more than paying their share. Why? Because those who are illegally present in the US can get very, very few benefits. Right? They can't get almost anything, including Social Security, right? They can't get welfare benefits and so on. So they are the one group for whom receipts actually exceed outlays. All right, next one, Patty, please. This is showing the same thing, but here by education. And it's thinking about 5 different education groups, just kind of increasing in education. And it's thinking about over the course of the lifetime, how much on net is your fiscal contribution. So this is the 0 line. And if you're below 0, you're basically receiving more than you're paying over your lifetime. This is high school dropouts. The high school dropouts who are both immigrants and natives receive more than they pay from the government over their lifetime. But it's a whole lot bigger for US natives. And again, this is because primarily unauthorized immigrants just can't get very much from the US government. When you look at more educated groups, this becomes positive for both immigrants and natives. So you think who's paying more in taxes than they're receiving government benefits over their lifetime? More educated people. So when you think about the size of our government debt at the federal level and how it has particularly ballooned over COVID, if you want to pay that off, one thing to do is get a lot more highly educated immigrants coming in, as well as educating more US natives, because then we just pay more in taxes, depending on what happens with tax policy, of course. But I think it's just an interesting way to look at it. All right, very last perception here. We are finally on number 5. So again, I'm going to get you out by 1:30. Is that whether immigration harms US natives' wages and employment. I'm a labor economist by training, and so this is the main area in which I work. And the answer here, unfortunately, is it's complicated, and we don't really know. If you put a whole bunch of labor economists who study this in a room and ask them this question, you will get as many different answers as there are labor economists in the room, I think. That we just can't really even agree on how exactly to measure the effect of immigration on US natives' wages and employment. And so Patty, this first bar chart here shows you a whole bunch of estimates, right? And this is the 0 line here. A few of the estimates are positive as to how this less skilled immigration affects US natives' wages. So a bunch of them are negative, right? But there's not like one single number. We don't really know. And so the next slide, please, Patty, is the same idea for all immigrants, not just the less educated, where we have some very negative estimates. This again is 0 line here, and then we have some positive estimates. Why is this hard to figure out? I hate to leave you at the very end of this by saying, well, we don't know, but it is very difficult to do things like to estimate the effect of immigration on US natives in the labor market, in part because the world is just a very complicated place, right? It's not that we can run scientific experiments like a physicist or a chemist or something in the lab where we can hold everything else constant, put an immigrant in and see what happens to US natives, what happens to their wages and employment. Instead, we're trying to piece through real world settings where many, many things are happening at the same time as immigrants are coming into the US, immigrants are leaving, US natives are moving around within the United States, they're changing their occupations and so on. But I think that the interesting thing about this is that a lot of economists will tell you that the effect of immigration on US natives in the labor market in terms of their wages and employment probably isn't terribly negative, that it's a minimal impact. It's just, given that we've received, 45 million foreign born coming into the United States, or currently living in the United States, we might expect there to be very adverse effects on US natives. And instead, it's going to say, yeah, there's some negative estimates, some positive estimates, but all of them just aren't that big because the US economy is a dynamic economy that can absorb lots of workers. When immigrants come, they buy stuff. They sometimes move to places US natives don't want to go. They sometimes take jobs US natives really kind of don't want to do and allow US natives to move into better jobs. At the higher educated end, they found companies. They do a lot of innovation and invention. They teach at our universities. And so the effect of immigration overall on US natives economically is probably just not that big, because there's many good aspects that can outweigh the fact that you have a lot of people coming in and potentially competing with US natives for jobs. So I think that's kind of the big takeaway. Yes, we have 45+ million, but we're a very big economy. We could certainly absorb more with a little of impact if we wanted to. And so with that, I certainly want to make sure that you get out of here by 1:30, as I was told.
We've got questions.
Sir, yes, of course.
Have you studied the demographics in the United States and the effect of immigration on that? Because the native birth rate in this country is well below replacement rate, and it ain't getting any better. So the immigrants that come in, and there's anecdotal evidence everywhere, are filling all kinds of jobs that we don't have enough people to do. Just tons of evidence on that. So I just wondered if you studied the relationship of those two and how these immigrants that are coming in are actually filling jobs because our younger people are not producing enough babies to take the job.
Well, the babies don't work for usually 16 at least years. But yes, there's really two ways you can grow your labor force. You can have babies that in 16, 20, whatever years start working, or you can admit immigrants now. And so when you admit immigrants now, typically they start working right away, that they are usually in their 20s and 30s. When people come into the United States, they are prime working age. They're going to work for a long time. The group that has been most negatively affected probably is high school dropouts, people who didn't complete high school in the US, compete heavily in some parts of the US, particularly Southern California, Texas, maybe South Florida, with Hispanic immigrants who also have low levels of education. So the average US native isn't competing with the average immigrant for jobs. And you're right, these are jobs that we do need filled, at least in the relatively short run. So I'm with you, but not everybody is. Yes.
The very first pie chart, children of illegal immigrants. Are they in your pie chart? And if so, where? And if not, why not?
They are US natives under the way that the Constitution is currently being interpreted. I am not a lawyer, but I am told by my immigration law friends that the Supreme Court's never directly ruled on this, but that the understanding is that immigrants, regardless of legal status, if their children are born in the US, are US citizens.
Do you have any sense, take your time frame, last 10 years, last 15 years, last 20 years, almost say pre-Great Recession, how many children have been born in the United States of illegal immigrants?
It is non-trivial, maybe 6 million, if I recall correctly. And again, these are going to be our future workers. And if they're going to have they do have US citizenship, I think we have my personal view, we have an interest in making sure they are educated and contribute to our economy.
Second question, the rest of your charts, when you use the word immigrant, were you including all that were on the pie chart?
Yes. So all foreign born. Again, I don't use the term like a lawyer would. I'm an economist.
That's okay. It's not like we don't have any lawyers in the room.
I think being an immigration attorney is a growth industry. Patty's waving back there.
Can you see
Do the
it?
chat?
Yeah. Come on, Bill, bring it on.
Can they ask it? Look at it.
So for me, it's summer break now.
Oh, good.
Political divide seems to be centered around illegal immigrants. Oh, y'all sound better as single members. The political divide seems to be centered around illegal immigrants. So what do the stats look like for just that? So they are relatively low educated, right? It's primarily relatively young men and increasingly women from Latin American countries, for the most part, who, at least the men, have incredibly high labor force participation rates. estimates are like 98% of unauthorized immigrant men work because there's no safety net for them. And they have relatively low levels of education for the most part. Whereas when you look at legal immigrants, they really run the gamut, from PhDs to, again, people who have just a few years of education. But when you think about unauthorized or illegal immigrants, it's a group that is interestingly shrinking in the United States, is relatively less educated, and primarily, although not exclusively, Hispanic.
If I heard correctly, in the news within the last day or two, there is a thought, a proposal, what have you, for the U.S. to send billions of dollars to the unfortunate countries in Central America. And I'm just wondering, from the perspective of, do you have any idea how that money would be used, or would it all be siphoned off before it ever got to a useful point?
We've been sending money down there for a long time. And I would think that a lot of it does end up going to things other than the intended purpose. So it would be difficult to design programs that truly helped the intended recipients. I think the problem in the Latin American, the Central American countries is so difficult to address because they're in political chaos. They're the gangs there, and the gangs are primarily led actually by kids who were in the United States and then were deported and are now in their late 20s, 30s, and so on, and are the gang overlords running these very efficient, very violent gangs.
They got a little education here.
Maybe not enough, but enough to make them incredibly efficient at what they do and horrifyingly bad. But what most economists will tell you is that there's what's called a migration hump, that initially when people's incomes go up, they become more likely to move because coming into the US, especially illegally, is expensive. Right, hiring what's called a coyote, right now to cross the US borders at least $10,000. And so if this money starts flowing into Central America, it's going to actually in the short run probably enable more people to come until conditions get good enough for people to no longer flee. So it is a true conundrum. And a lot of people who are not perhaps my political bent will tell you that it is in part our making for having deported these young men back to these countries.
After that little political bomb. Where's the hook? No, I'm just joking. Thank you, Madeline. No, it's a thank you. We will be making a contribution to the Rotary Foundation for Polio Plus in your honor. Thank you. Okay, so RSVP for every single thing that you want to do that we are doing so that we can know that you're coming. That means all of the things you've heard about today and our meetings. Don't forget to do that. Next week, our speaker will be Gene Frenette with Florida Times Union. Please join me in the Rotary motto. Service above self, one province best, who serves best. See you next week.
Great step, a lot of subjects. Glad you joined us.